This is the story of a woman who couldn't figure out what to do, so she made a list. Today's story is called The List That Made Her Millions.
Season 2 of the story features 12 trailblazers who started a business that changed the world. The story is brought to you exclusively by Salesforce, the world's #1 customer relationship management platform. More than 150,000 businesses are using Salesforce to blaze their own trails to success. And now, on to the story.
As a young girl, she was a math geek. That passion for learning led her to become the first person in her family to graduate college. As she approached graduation, she got 2 job offers. One was a position as an accountant. The job was at a well-known company. Her friends and family had all heard of that company. They were impressed. The second offer was from a young businessman she had interned with over the summer. He wanted her to do door-to-door sales at his brand new company. The job was 100% commission. Her friends and family weren't impressed with the second offer. They all told her to stick with the first. The accounting job was for a well-known company. That was a dream job. But the girl's grandfather wanted to hear more about that second option. What did that crazy guy want to do? Why did he want her to sell things door to door? He told her that any job that would force her to think on her feet would be good. He asked her, what's the difference between being 22 and looking for a job or being 23 and looking for a job? Give it a year. Her grandfather's final question was, what did she have to lose by taking it? Everything, she thought. She was risk averse. But when she thought more deeply about it, she realized the only thing at stake was what other people might think. Yeah, it was kind of embarrassing that she'd gone to college only to end up in a job doing door-to-door sales. But the accounting job did sound boring. The second job offer was more interesting, and so was the guy making the offer. She thanked her grandfather and accepted the second offer. Soon she was in Columbus working with Bill. The business they were working on was just an idea. The idea started when Bill was remodeling his home. He was trying to find good contractors, and it was nearly impossible. He reasoned that if he was having that problem, he knew that there had to be millions of other people having the same problem. The idea made sense to the young woman, because back in Indianapolis, there was already a business called Unified Neighbors that recommended trusted contractors. But there wasn't anything like it in Columbus, and she and Bill had an opportunity to build something similar. Bill had $50,000 that he was ready to invest into the business. They called it Columbus Neighbors. The young woman was excited to get the business off the ground. But getting a new business off the ground is the hardest part. The woman was soon out on the streets, knocking door to door and asking business owners to sign up. In the evenings, she would pick up the phone and cold call businesses. She thought it would be easy, but she hadn't learned the art of no. Soon she heard no hundreds of times, then thousands. Many of the no's were accompanied by slammed doors, yelling, and outright anger. As the no's built up, it was clear that getting Columbus Neighbors off the ground was going to be impossible. In a wake of frustration, she called her boss and asked to meet up. They met up at a coffee shop, and she broke down crying. She tried to talk, but for an hour, all she could do was just cry. Her head pounded, her eyes grew puffy, and she had never expected that no's would hurt this much. It wasn't working. Why had she agreed to take this ridiculous job? She could be sitting in a comfy office in Indianapolis, and instead, she was crying at a coffee shop. Bill listened, and then told her that Columbus Neighbors would eventually work. If Unified Neighbors was working in Indianapolis, then they could make it work here. She was getting the no's because she wasn't good at sales yet. She could turn them into yeses if she kept trying. The word stung, but he was right. She agreed. She needed to get better at her job. She got back to work, but the months wore on, and so did the no's. More meetings with Bill followed, but something was changing now. The young woman was starting to devour all the information and books she could find about sales. Now, when she felt herself becoming negative, she would stop. She would choose new words and phrases. And when she didn't know what else to tell her boss, she found a new 5-word favorite. I'm not going to quit. After that, it was back to the phones and back to knocking on doors. The no's kept coming, but so did the yeses. Companies and families were starting to join Columbus Neighbors, but the progress was painfully slow. After her first year, she only got 1,500 people to sign up. They were a long way away from profitability. When she asked for advice from people other than Bill and her grandfather, they told her to quit. Her mother even got a hold of Bill's personal phone number and called him. She told him that he was ruining her life. They should stop trying whatever it was they were trying to do and go find real jobs. Bill listened, but he knew they could pull it off. They doubled down and started running ads for Columbus Neighbors in local newspapers. Then they started attending trade shows and events. By now, all the practice was paying off. Their customers were talking, they loved the service, and they weren't shy about sharing it with everyone. New customers started to roll in. They couldn't believe it. The work had felt horrible for the first year and a half, but now it was fun. The only thing about the business that wasn't working was the name. Columbus Neighbors wasn't a name that they could use to expand to other cities. Besides, Mr. Rogers already had a corner on the neighbors market. It wasn't really about the city or the neighbors. Their business was about a list of the best people and other small businesses that could help you accomplish your goals. They brainstormed and knew the list needed to have a personal feel, like you were getting a recommendation from a trusted friend. They considered naming it after one of their investors' mothers. They tried the new name, Jackie's List. It didn't sound quite right, and Jackie wasn't really involved with the business. In the beginning, it was just her and Bill. She had built the list through weekdays and weekends of hard work. She'd gone through thousands of no's until she found out how to reach the few people who would say yes. The new name was obvious. It was her list. They rebranded and relaunched Columbus Neighbors. Angie's List was a hit. Over 20 years later, Angie's List is a top online resource for homeowners across the U.S. It's used religiously by millions of customers. Angie Hicks wasn't always a fan of the spotlight, but she was a fan of doing the things necessary to make the business a success. As her business grew, she took 18 months away from the company to attend Harvard Business School. When she returned, she helped lead the company as they made their first investments into their web and mobile presence. Angie's story is a testament to the power of steady progress and not being afraid to push herself to the point of tears. Later, Angie would look back on it all and say that the secret, which isn't really so much a secret as it is just a really hard thing to do, is to not give up. Our first year was really, really difficult, and there were many days when I wanted to pack up, go find a regular job, and leave it all behind. But I knew we had a great idea for which there was a real and long-lasting demand. I'd say that the second most important thing is to have a good support system. My co-founder Bill was a rock. He'd listen to me talk about how it didn't seem like we were getting anywhere and encouraged me to keep at it. He celebrated every success when it came down to it, and that emotional support was more important than the financial backing. So how many no's can you stand? Can you push yourself to the point of tears, recover, and then get back at it? If you can do that, then the world is yours. And besides, what do you have to lose? That's her story. What's yours going to be?
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Story. We have an exclusive giveaway for our listeners, 2 free tickets to Salesforce Connections in Chicago on June 12th through June 14th. Salesforce Connections is the digital marketing, commerce, and customer service event of the year. You'll learn how to create personalized experiences at every touchpoint and deliver service that drives growth and exceeds consumer expectations. Head to thestorypodcast.com and enter to win today. That's thestorypodcast.com. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Salesforce, for sharing these stories of business trailblazers who changed the world. Also, join Salesforce on May 1st in San Francisco for an upcoming event called Trailblazing Women. There, we'll hear from successful women in sales and marketing and learn how they've broken the glass ceiling and blazed new trails in their professions. Visit the link in the podcast show notes for more details.
If you like this episode of The Story, please help spread these stories by telling one friend. Also, you can hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Story is created by our team here at The Mission. The Mission is your #1 source for accelerated learning. To get more stories and podcasts like this and our world-class newsletter, subscribe at themission.co. That's themission.co. See you next time.